My name's Vincent. I'm 34 years old, and if you asked most people who know me, they'd probably say I'm the guy you call when your life's falling apart at 2 a.m. and you need someone who won't judge you, who'll just show up with gas in the tank and no questions asked. I've always been that guy, for friends, co-workers, neighbors, but especially for family. Maybe too much for family. I wasn't born into wealth. Neither were my siblings. My parents worked blue-collar jobs in Pittsburgh and did their best to raise 3 kids on 1.5 incomes. My older brother, Mason, is 37, charismatic, loud, ambitious in a flashy kind of way. He always wanted to be the man, even when we were little. My younger sister, Ellie, is 29 and the peacemaker of the family. She's got a soft heart and a nervous laugh that fills up a room, even when things are tense. Growing up, Mason and I were never close. He'd mock me for reading instead of playing football, for choosing computer science electives instead of shop class, and for being too boring to ever succeed in anything real. But he was Mom's golden boy, even when he dropped out of college, even when he totaled her car and blamed it on the brakes. Somehow, he always landed on his feet, and if he didn't, Mom made sure he had a cushioned fall. I, on the other hand, did everything by the book. I graduated top of my class, got a full ride to Carnegie Mellon, and landed a remote tech job at a fast-growing startup before remote work became the norm. I don't flaunt my money. I still drive a 10-year-old sedan and wear the same coat I bought in 2017. But over the past decade, I've done well for myself. Quietly. And maybe that's part of the problem. 3 years ago, just after the pandemic peak, Mason lost his job. Something about personality conflicts and management not understanding him. He spun the story, of course, said they were intimidated by his leadership and ambition. Mom ate it up, but behind closed doors, he was panicking. He had a wife, 2 kids, a mortgage on a 5-bedroom house in the suburbs, and a leased Range Rover with payments north of $900 a month. I offered to help, not out of pity, but because I've always believed in helping family, especially the kids, who had nothing to do with their father's ego. I quietly offered to cover a couple months of bills to give him breathing room. Then a couple months became 6. Then a year. Soon I was paying the mortgage, the utilities, the car lease, everything but their groceries. Mason would thank me here and there, but mostly with gritted teeth, as if accepting help from me bruised his pride every time. To be clear, I never lorded it over him. Not once. In fact, we never told Mom or Ellie. Mason insisted it would embarrass him, and I respected that. I never asked him when he'd pay me back or if he was looking for work. I figured he was struggling, and maybe he just needed time. What I didn't realize was how deep his entitlement had grown. Last Thanksgiving, I noticed a shift. We were all at Mom's cramped house, everyone packed around a mismatched dining table with folding chairs. Mason showed up late, wearing a new smartwatch and a suede jacket that definitely wasn't budget-friendly. He didn't acknowledge me, not even a nod. But when dessert came around and I complimented the pie, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Yeah, thanks to people who actually contribute to the family." I blinked. I thought maybe I'd misheard. But Ellie gave me a look, one of those wide-eyed, uncomfortable glances that said, did he really just say that? I let it slide. Maybe it was just stress or a dumb attempt at humor. Mason always liked jabs disguised as jokes. But then came the group text for Christmas planning. Ellie suggested we all meet at Mason's house this year. He had more space, after all, and the kids wouldn't have to be bundled up and dragged across town. Mason's wife, Rachel, agreed and said they'd host, but then Mason followed up directly to me. He didn't even text. He called. "Vincent," he said, and the tone was already condescending, like a manager about to let someone go. "Listen, I think maybe it's best you don't come this year." I paused. "What? You know, things are tight. It's a family-only thing, and we don't want to make anyone uncomfortable." I let the silence sit. "I am family." "Right," he said. "But like, everyone's bringing something, pitching in. And you always show up empty-handed." "Empty-handed? I've brought the main course the last 3 Christmases. I even hired a caterer once when their oven broke." I was about to remind him of that when he added, "Look, I don't want to argue, but there's no room at the table for freeloading losers." That's when I realized something. Mason didn't just resent me. He genuinely believed I owed him something. That my help was a burden I should be thankful to carry. That because I never flaunted my success, he'd rewritten our entire dynamic in his head. "Got it," I said. "You don't want me there." He didn't even have the grace to sound ashamed. It's not personal. Sure. What he didn't know, what no one knew, was that for the past 26 months, I'd been the financial scaffolding holding up their entire life. Every month, like clockwork, I wired $3,700 to cover their mortgage, electric, gas, internet, and the lease on that ridiculous SUV. I never missed a payment. Not even when I had to cover surprise dental surgery last spring. But apparently, that made me a freeloader. I didn't yell. I didn't even argue. I just said, all right. Message received. I hung up, opened my laptop, and logged into every account I managed for them. The mortgage? Auto pay disabled. The car lease? Same. Utilities? Scheduled payments canceled. I didn't send a warning. I didn't write a dramatic email or drop a sarcastic line in the family group chat. I just quietly stopped. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Now, I didn't expect instant chaos. These things take time. Bills come due at the end of the month. Grace periods extend another 15 days. Mortgage companies send polite reminders before foreclosure warnings. Car leases give you leeway before repossession teams get involved. But I knew what was coming. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilty about it. I just sat back and waited. That was 3 weeks ago. This morning, I woke up to 7 missed calls. Then 10. Then 17. All from Mason. Then Rachel. Then a new number I didn't recognize, probably the bank. I didn't answer any of them, but I did listen to one voicemail. Mason's voice cracked halfway through as he said, "Vincent, man, we need to talk. I think something's wrong with the accounts. Did you change something? Rachel's freaking out. Please call me back." I deleted the voicemail and smiled, because for once, I wasn't the one sitting quietly at the kids' table, swallowing my pride. And for once, Mason would finally understand what it meant to stand on his own 2 feet, or fall flat on his face. That's where things were, until this afternoon. That's when the real chaos started. And you're not going to believe what happened next. I wish I could say I turned off my phone that day and never looked back, but part of me, call it morbid curiosity, wanted to watch the train wreck unfold in real time. I didn't answer Mason's calls, but I listened to every voicemail. At first, they were polite, a little nervous. "Hey man, just checking in. Not sure if something glitched with the bank. Maybe a system issue? Call me when you get this." Then the tone shifted. By day 3, the calls came every hour. "Bro, I don't know what's going on, but the power company says the payment didn't go through, and they're threatening to shut off the heat. It's freezing. Just hit me back." By day 6, it wasn't subtle anymore. "What the hell is going on, Vincent? You think this is funny? The mortgage company says we're in default. The kids are scared. Rachel's crying in the bedroom. Pick up the damn phone." Still, I said nothing. I hadn't blocked him. That would have been too easy. I wanted him to stew in it. To hear his own voice echoing back into the silence he used to fill with smugness. But it wasn't until Mom got involved that things truly escalated. She called me late on a Sunday night, her voice tight with that strained blend of forced calm and barely concealed panic she always used when trying to guilt me. "Vincent, honey, I just got off the phone with Mason. He's very upset." I didn't say anything. Just let her keep going. "He says you've been acting strangely, that you canceled some payments or something. Look, I don't know the whole story, but they're in a tough spot right now." A beat of silence. And you know how proud Mason is. He wouldn't ask for help if it wasn't serious. I swallowed the laugh bubbling in my throat. Wouldn't ask for help? The man had practically built a career on mooching off of other people's goodwill. "Mom," I said slowly, "do you know how long I've been paying Mason's bills?" Silence. Then, a hesitant, "Well, I knew you helped out a little after he lost that job." "A little," I repeated, my voice sharper than I intended. "Try over 2 years. Mortgage, utilities, car lease. Thousands of dollars. Every single month." Another silence. Then, softly, "He said you offered." I did. And he never once said thank you. But now, because I don't want to be insulted and uninvited from family gatherings, I'm the bad guy. She sighed, and I heard the edge of her guilt creeping in. "It's not about that. It's Christmas, Vincent. Family should be together. He made a mistake, sure, but can't you be the bigger person?" There it was. Be the bigger person. That phrase had been shoved down my throat since I was 8. When Mason pushed me down the stairs, and I got blamed for yelling. When he stole my birthday money and lied about it, and I got scolded for creating drama. When he wrecked my first car and Mom begged me not to press charges because he was going through a rough patch. I'd been the bigger person. My whole damn life. No, I said, my voice firm. Not this time. She didn't like that. I could tell. Her voice tightened. So you're just going to let your niece and nephew freeze? Let them get kicked out of their home. They're not my responsibility, I said quietly. And frankly, it's not my job to clean up after Mason's messes anymore. She hung up on me. I stared at my phone for a long time afterward, the silence of my apartment louder than any voicemail. For a second, I questioned myself. Was I being cruel? Was this too far? But then I remembered Christmases past, when I brought gifts for Mason's kids, only for him to brag about how he got them everything they wanted. When I cooked and cleaned and drove across town with trays of food, and he barely acknowledged I was there. When he got drunk 2 years ago and told everyone at the dinner table that I probably paid for friends too, since no one would hang out with a boring IT guy like me. I remembered all of it. The turning point came a week before Christmas. Ellie called me, which was rare. She's not a phone person. She's the type to send a dozen texts instead of one call. But this time, she wanted to talk. Vin, she said, her voice low. I just got back from Mom's. You're not going to believe what Mason said. My stomach tightened. What now? He told her you stole from him. That you hacked into his accounts and canceled everything out of spite. That you were always jealous and trying to sabotage him. I blinked. What? I know, she said quickly. It's insane. But Mom believes him. She said maybe it was some kind of revenge thing, because he asked you not to come to Christmas. I stared at the ceiling. My heart wasn't even pounding anymore. It just felt hollow. Cold. Like the part of me that still wanted their approval had finally withered up. Ellie kept talking. He's showing her bank statements. Well, just the parts that make him look like a victim. He said you were trying to destroy the family from within. Like some evil tech wizard or something. I let out a bitter laugh. I kept the receipts, Elle. Every payment, every transfer, every account setup. I've got it all documented. I figured, she said softly. But Mom doesn't want to see it. She said it would only make things worse. Of course, evidence was inconvenient when it threatened the version of the story she wanted to believe. I just thought you should know, Ellie said after a pause. I'm sorry. Don't be, I said. You didn't do anything wrong. But the damage was done. The next day, I got a certified letter. At first, I thought it was a prank. But no, Mason had sent me a cease and desist. Apparently, he'd spoken to a legal advisor, translation, probably a friend of a friend who once took a business law class, and was accusing me of unauthorized interference in personal financial matters. He claimed I'd sabotaged his family's livelihood and demanded restitution. I read the letter 3 times, then calmly placed it on the counter. I didn't respond. Instead, I went back to my files. Every transfer, backed up. Every invoice, saved. Every email where he'd begged for help, archived. I didn't know if he was bluffing or actually planning to sue, but if he wanted to turn this into a war, he'd picked the wrong opponent. That weekend, I ran into Rachel, his wife, at a local grocery store. She didn't see me at first. She was pushing a half-empty cart and muttering under her breath while trying to keep the youngest kid from grabbing candy off the shelves. I almost didn't say anything. But then she looked up. Our eyes met. Her face froze. Vincent, Rachel. She looked terrible. Not just tired, worn down. Her hair was unwashed, her eyes puffy. The makeup she'd always used to mask stress was gone, replaced by raw skin and smudged mascara. I guess you're proud of yourself, she said quietly. I tilted my head. Excuse me. You couldn't just let it go, could you? She said, her voice shaking. You had to ruin everything, just to prove some petty point. I stared at her. I supported your household for over 2 years. I never asked for a thank you. Never made it public. I only stopped after your husband called me a freeloader and uninvited me from Christmas. She didn't respond. I'm not the one who ruined anything, I added. Then I walked away. I didn't need her apology. But what really cracked me open, what broke something in me that I didn't know could still break, was Christmas morning. I woke up to another voicemail. This time from my niece. She sounded small, fragile, confused. Uncle Vincent, Daddy said we weren't allowed to open our presents this year. He said it's your fault. But Mommy said not to cry. Can you come over? I miss you. I sat on my couch for a long time. Not angry. Not sad. Just numb. Because Mason had dragged his own children into this. Used them like weapons. painted me as the villain in their innocent little eyes. And that was the final line. Not the insults, not the lies, not the betrayal. That was when I knew. It was time to stop playing defense. It was time to show Mason what real consequences looked like. Because the storm hadn't even started yet. And I was done being the umbrella. I didn't respond to the voicemail. I couldn't. I listened to my niece's tiny, trembling voice over and over again until it echoed in my head long after I set the phone down. That little girl had once curled up in my lap to watch cartoons, had once whispered to me that I was her favorite uncle because I always made her feel safe. And now her father had twisted that trust, turned me into the monster in the story, all to save face. That was the lowest point. Not the betrayal, not the manipulation, not the endless voicemails that shifted from rage to pleading to threats and back again. It was that voicemail, that soft little voice asking me if I could come over. Like she thought I had disappeared, like she thought I had abandoned her. That shattered me. I spent the next few days avoiding everything. No calls, no texts. I turned off all my notifications and threw myself into the quiet. I went to the gym for the first time in weeks. Ran until my legs burned and my chest ached. Sat in the steam room and let the silence scald the noise out of my head. And when I got home, I opened my laptop and started deleting things. Not important files, just clutter. Old emails from Mason, reminders of his requests, favors I'd done. I deleted them all. Then I pulled up a blank document and wrote something I hadn't written in over a decade. You are not their savior. You are not their scapegoat. You are your own damn person. I printed it, taped it to the fridge, and stared at it every time I grabbed something to eat. Because I needed the reminder. For years, I had lived in this half-life where I defined my worth through service, through proving I was good enough, helpful enough, valuable enough to the very people who made me feel invisible. I thought if I just kept giving, eventually they'd see me, appreciate me, maybe even love me the way I needed. But all it did was feed a system that was never built to honor me. So I stopped. Not just financially, emotionally, spiritually. I stopped checking the family group chat. I stopped waiting for the apology that would never come. I stopped imagining that I could change the narrative by being better. And then something strange happened. I started to feel lighter. The kind of lightness you feel after taking off a weighted vest you didn't realize you were wearing. The kind of lightness that makes you angry at first. Angry that you carried it for so long. Angry that no one told you it wasn't yours to carry. But beneath the anger, beneath the ache, was something deeper. Relief. I got back into things I'd neglected. I dusted off my neglected photography gear and spent a whole Saturday hiking and snapping shots of frozen streams and quiet pine trails. I joined a local cooking class, not because I needed to learn, but because it was something for me. Something that didn't benefit anyone else. Something that had no ROI except joy. At work, I started volunteering for side projects I used to avoid. I wasn't burned out anymore. The mental fog that had hovered over me, the one I never traced back to Mason, was gone. For the first time in years, I wasn't emotionally drained from keeping someone else afloat. I started sleeping better. I started laughing more. I started living. And then I started planning. I didn't want revenge, not in the cartoonish, over-the-top sense Mason probably expected. I didn't want to scream or throw things or expose him in front of the family like he'd done to me. That wasn't my style. But I did want closure. And I knew the only way to get it was to face the mess I'd spent years enabling. I started by getting my finances in order. I met with a financial advisor, someone I'd avoided hiring because I always felt like I was just getting by, even though I wasn't. Turns out I had more saved than I realized. A lot more. All those years of quiet living, careful spending, and passive income from my side projects had added up. Vincent, the advisor said during our second meeting, you could retire in your mid-40s if you stay the course. You've done an incredible job. I blinked at him. Seriously? Seriously. You're in the top 3% of savers I've seen in your bracket. That sat with me for a while. I wasn't a failure. I wasn't a loser. I wasn't the freeloader Mason accused me of being. I was free. With that clarity, I started tying up loose ends. I had been the primary account holder on several of the services Mason used, mostly because he hadn't qualified for them when he applied. So I sent formal letters to each company, revoking authorization and removing myself entirely. I wanted no liability, no paper trail, nothing he could point to and say, see, he still has control. I also started documenting everything. Every payment, every email, Every receipt. Not for revenge, but for protection. Mason's cease and desist letter had been the opening volley in what could become a legal battle, and I wanted to be ready. Once all of that was squared away, I booked a one-way flight to Colorado. Ellie had invited me out for years, ever since she moved there for work. I always said no, claimed I was too busy, too broke, too responsible. But now, there was nothing tying me down. So I went. And for the first time in my adult life, I breathed air that didn't taste like obligation. Ellie picked me up from the airport, and we didn't talk about Mason. Not at first. We just drove through snowy streets, catching up like old friends. We got brunch at a quiet cafe with wood-paneled walls and mismatched mugs, and then she took me to her apartment, small, sunlit, filled with books and cozy blankets. It felt like a different world. That night, over takeout and cheap wine, she finally brought him up. "I've been meaning to tell you," she said, curling her legs under herself on the couch. "Mom started saying weird stuff." I raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" "Like how you tore the family apart. That you manipulated Mason into taking your money so you could control him. That you orchestrated this whole thing." I laughed. I couldn't help it. It was too absurd. "She's rewriting history," I said. "Yup. But here's the kicker. Mason told her he never asked for your help. Said you offered everything and then weaponized it when he didn't grovel." That stung. Even now, after everything, part of me wanted to scream the truth. Wanted to march into my mother's house, throw down the receipts, and shout, "Look at what I did for him." But I didn't. Because it wouldn't matter. They'd believe what they wanted to believe. They always had. Ellie must have seen it on my face, because she reached over and squeezed my hand. "I believe you," she said. "And I'm not the only one." I nodded. And that was enough. For now. The next morning, I hiked a mountain trail Ellie had recommended. It was early, barely past dawn, and the sky was still painted in streaks of pink and gold. The cold bit at my cheeks, but the movement warmed me. At the top, I stood alone and looked out over the valley. And for the first time in what felt like years, I let go. Of Mason. Of my mom. Of the twisted version of family they tried to sell me. I wasn't their emotional mule anymore. I wasn't their backup plan. I wasn't their enemy. I was me. Vincent. 34. Whole. Free. That's when I made the decision. I wasn't just going to protect myself. I was going to reclaim everything they tried to take from me. Not through spite. Through strength. Through truth. Because what Mason didn't realize, what none of them realized, was that by pushing me away, by trying to humiliate and erase me, they'd given me the best gift of all. A clean break. And now? Now it was time to build. And in the background, his world was already beginning to crumble. But the real fallout? That hadn't even begun yet. Ellie dropped me off at the airport 2 weeks after I'd arrived in Colorado, and neither of us said the word Mason once during that final drive. Not because we were avoiding it, but because we didn't have to anymore. We'd already said everything that needed saying. And what was left between us, between me and the one person in my family who hadn't twisted reality into a mirror maze of guilt and denial, was peace. It felt strange to feel this calm flying home, knowing I was returning not to a storm, but to the quiet after one. Or maybe the quiet before one. Either way, I wasn't bracing myself anymore. I was thinking, planning. By the time I landed back in Pennsylvania, I already had a mental list of everything I'd need to do, not just to protect myself, but to reclaim something I'd lost in all those years of swallowing insults and smiling through family dinners that left me hollow. I didn't want revenge for the sake of revenge. This wasn't about making Mason cry or suffer, though I wouldn't lose sleep if he did. This was about taking my power back in the most thorough, unshakable way possible. I wanted to make sure he felt the consequences, not just once, but again and again, the way I had every time he made me the family punchline, every time he threw a party with my money and then mocked me for being too square to enjoy life. And to do that, I needed leverage. Fortunately, Mason had left a paper trail wide enough to drive a moving truck through. Back at my apartment, I started going through my records in earnest. I had already compiled the basics: payment histories, bank transfers, copies of leases, emails where he asked for help, and texts where he casually confirmed things like, "Yo, can you cover the mortgage again this month?" But now, I was organizing it all. I built a digital folder system: mortgage, utilities, vehicle, text threads, voicemails. Then I did something I hadn't dared do before. I wrote out a timeline. From the very first payment, August 12th, 2021, to the last, made on November 30th, 2023. 28 months. Over $95,000. That number punched me in the gut. Seeing it written out like that, with totals, breakdowns, dates, made everything real in a way it hadn't been before. This wasn't just helping out. This was an entire down payment on a house. This was someone's entire college fund. This was my life savings, handed over in silence while Mason strutted around pretending he was getting back on his feet. And now, I was going to use it. The first step was legal. I scheduled a consultation with a lawyer I found through a referral from a coworker, someone who specialized in financial fraud and civil litigation. Her name was Julia, mid-40s, sharp eyes, and a voice like steel wrapped in velvet. She skimmed through the folders I brought her, digital and hard copy, and raised her eyebrows more than once. "He called you a freeloader?" she asked dryly, clicking through the spreadsheets. "In front of the whole family," I said. She gave a tight nod, the kind that said, "Oh, we're dealing with one of those." Then she leaned back in her chair and steepled her fingers. "Vincent, what you've got here is airtight. Every transfer you made was tied to a service. You have proof of consent and proof he benefited from your funds. You even have messages showing he requested your help. He can't claim you were interfering. If anything, you have a case for reimbursement or, at the very least, damages for defamation and emotional distress. Do I have a case if he tries to sue me? He won't win. But if he does, we can counterclaim. You'll walk away with everything he owes you." That was enough for me. I didn't want to file yet, but I needed the backup. I needed to know, for once, that I wasn't alone, that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't the villain in some warped family drama. I left her office feeling taller. Next, I turned to the public piece. Mason was obsessed with image. He'd always been that way. Facebook posts with "grind never stops" captions, Instagram shots of his family at ski resorts paid for by my credit card, inspirational TikToks about rising from nothing that made me want to throw my phone across the room. He prided himself on being the comeback king, and nothing would hit him harder than the truth, served plainly, calmly, and without emotion. I started drafting an open letter. Not for social media, not yet, but just to get it out. I wasn't sure where it would end up, a group text, a forwarded email, maybe even a legal document down the line, but I wrote it anyway. Every word carefully chosen. Every fact backed up by receipts. To those who have heard Mason's side of the story, I want to offer mine. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. For 28 months, I supported his household financially. Every mortgage payment, every utility bill, every car lease installment. The total sum exceeds $95,000, documented and traceable. This support was given willingly at first, quietly, out of love. It only stopped when I was publicly insulted, uninvited from family events, and then accused of being a freeloader. I paused, then added, "Mason has rewritten history to cast himself as a victim. That's his choice. But I will not be the villain in his fairy tale. I will no longer stay silent to preserve the comfort of people who stood by while I was erased. I have done nothing to be ashamed of, and I will not apologize for stepping away from a system built on silence, guilt, and manipulation." I didn't sign it with "Love, Vincent." Just Vincent. Simple. Final. I saved it. I didn't send it. Not yet. Instead, I turned to the final step of my setup, pulling the last financial threads he was still using against me. That's when I discovered something I hadn't expected. In one of the old payment portals, an electric company account I'd long since stopped funding, I found my name still listed as co-signer, which was odd because I'd never intentionally co-signed anything. But then I checked my credit report, and I nearly dropped my coffee. There was a loan on it. A personal loan for $20,000, taken out 8 months ago. With my information, I felt the blood drain from my face. I clicked through the details. The loan was taken out online, tied to an IP address in my hometown. The listed phone number wasn't mine, but it was close. And the email? Off by one letter from my own. It was identity fraud. He stole my identity. For a moment, I just sat there, staring, breathing. Then, slowly, I stood up and smiled. Because Mason hadn't just insulted me. He hadn't just used me. He had committed a crime. And now I had everything I needed. I spent the next 3 days compiling a new folder, identity theft. I filed a police report. Then I met with Julia again. Her eyes lit up when she saw the documents. "Oh, he's done," she said. "This isn't civil anymore. This is criminal." And if you want to move forward, we can file charges. I nodded. I want to. Do you want to press for repayment? Not just repayment, I said. I want the truth to come out. I want my name cleared. She nodded slowly. We can do that. Then I took it one step further. I contacted the car lease company, the mortgage bank, every institution where my name had been used, even tangentially. I formally revoked any ties, froze all accounts, and ensured nothing could be traced back to me again. Mason was on his own, truly, legally, fully. And then, finally, I made a new plan. Something public, but not online. Not yet. A family event was coming up, my cousin's engagement party. A small gathering, mostly extended family. I hadn't planned on going. But now I was thinking maybe I would. And maybe I'd bring Julia. Not as my plus one. As my attorney. Because Mason wouldn't be expecting that. He wouldn't be expecting me. The version of me who'd stopped playing nice. The version who no longer made room at the table for people who spit in his face. The version who didn't just build a new life, but was ready to burn down the old one. The day of the engagement party arrived like any other, quiet, gray, forgettable, but there was a charge in the air, a hum beneath the surface like the moment before a storm breaks. I hadn't RSVP'd. I hadn't even told Ellie I planned to go. The only person who knew was Julia, my lawyer, who, in the days leading up to this, had become something of an ally. Not just in the legal sense, but in the human sense. She understood why I needed to be there, not for revenge, but for truth. For the record. For the reckoning. The venue was a rented community center. Low ceilings. Too many folding chairs. Cheap floral arrangements. It was a strange backdrop for what I was about to do, but somehow fitting. Mason always wanted to look like he was doing better than he was. He dressed up cardboard and called it luxury. I walked in around 5:45 p.m., just as most people were finishing their first drinks. The room quieted a little when they saw me. Not because I made an entrance, but because no one expected me to show. Especially not him. Mason stood near the refreshment table, fake laughing with a few cousins I hadn't seen in years. He was in one of those try-hard sports jackets with elbow patches, and when he noticed me, his entire face stiffened like a wax figure melting in real time. He didn't approach. Not yet. But I could see the twitch in his jaw. Julia arrived 3 minutes later, dressed in a neutral gray dress and carrying a sleek leather folder tucked under one arm. She looked more like a corporate consultant than a lawyer about to turn a family event into a courtroom. But that was the point. No fireworks. No drama. Just facts. Truth. Consequences. We waited until the party was in full swing, music on, people dancing, drinks flowing, before making our move. I walked up to Mason in front of his circle of admirers. Hey, I said casually. Got a minute? He stiffened. Now's not a great time. I think you'll want to make time, Julia said, stepping up beside me. He blinked at her. And who are you? Julia Mandel, she said. I represent Vincent. You should have received a cease and desist letter this morning. His eyes went wide for just a flicker, so he had seen it. I smiled. I believe you know what this is about, she continued, her voice calm. Measured. Professional. But to make it abundantly clear, you are currently being investigated for financial misconduct, including but not limited to identity theft, defamation, and fraud. We've compiled over 200 pieces of evidence documenting a financial trail spanning 28 months. There's a civil case already in progress and a criminal one pending based on the forged loan application using Vincent's name. You're joking, he said, laugh snorting, looking around like there'd be a camera crew jumping out to yell gotcha. But no one moved. No one laughed. And suddenly, he realized how very, very alone he was. I stepped forward. You told everyone I tried to ruin your life. That I manipulated you, lied to you, sabotaged you. He opened his mouth, but I cut him off. I have every transfer, every text, every invoice. You stole my identity, Mason. That wasn't just selfish. That was criminal. Someone nearby gasped. I didn't turn to see who. Julia handed him an envelope. You'll want to read that. It outlines the charges and gives you a copy of the compiled evidence. You'll also see a list of institutions we've contacted to notify them of the fraud, including the loan office that's now flagging your account for investigation. Mason took it with shaking hands. His face was pale, mouth half open. For once, the man had nothing to say. I could have walked away then, but I didn't. Not yet. Do you remember what you said to me? I asked. You said there's no room at the table for freeloading losers. His throat bobbed, but he didn't speak. Well, I said, stepping in just a little closer. Turns out the only freeloader here was the guy pretending to be self-made while living off the guy he called a loser. He flinched like I'd slapped him. I stepped back, letting that land. Then I turned to leave. Julia followed. And as we walked past stunned relatives and half-frozen partygoers, I saw Ellie standing by the back wall. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes met mine, and she nodded. Not just in approval, in understanding. It didn't end there. Within a week, the investigation into the fraudulent loan began in earnest. Mason tried to stall it, of course, claimed it was all a misunderstanding, blamed some hacker for the account. But digital forensics don't lie. The IP addresses tied to the application were traced back to his home network. The phone number matched a burner he'd used before. The forged email had been recovered from a backup cache. When the detective called to confirm that I wanted to move forward, I didn't hesitate. Yes, I said. Absolutely. That was the first domino. The second fell when the civil case went public. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was just filed. Publicly. Accessibly. And suddenly people started talking. The same family members who once rolled their eyes when I said Mason was taking advantage of me now asked if I had proof. I did. I sent them the open letter. No rage. No name-calling. Just the truth. And slowly, the tide turned. Rachel left him. I heard about it from Ellie. How she'd packed up the kids and moved in with her sister 3 towns over. Said she couldn't be legally attached to someone who might go to prison. It wasn't noble. It wasn't sudden. But it was something. The Range Rover? Gone. Repossessed in the middle of the night. The house. In foreclosure. And Mason? Mason was exactly where he'd always claimed to be, rock bottom. But this time, no one was bailing him out. Not Mom. Not Rachel. Not me. Mom tried to call me a week after the party. She left a long voicemail, tearful and confused, saying she didn't know what to believe anymore, and that this all got way too far. I didn't respond. Not out of spite. Out of peace. Because I finally understood that I didn't need her validation. I didn't need anyone's. I had the truth. And my life? It was mine again. Clean. Quiet. Whole. I kept working, kept building. Took a trip to the coast, just because I could. Started writing again, fiction, this time. Stories with characters who knew how to walk away from broken people without setting themselves on fire to keep them warm. And one day, maybe a month later, I got a card in the mail. Handwritten. No return address. Inside was a crayon drawing. Stick figures. A man with glasses, holding hands with 2 kids. Above it, in blocky handwriting. Thank you for everything. I miss you. Love, Emma. My niece. I sat down on the couch and just stared at it. Not crying. Not smiling. Just feeling. Because that was the only part of the whole mess that had ever truly hurt. And maybe, just maybe, that little card was the beginning of something new. Not a fix. Not a return. But a start. One rooted in truth. In honesty. In earned peace. And as I tucked the card away in a drawer, I realized something. Mason didn't destroy me. He revealed me. He stripped away the weight I'd been carrying for years. And in doing so, he handed me the very thing he never had. A future without him.